Thank you for the introduction. Thank you very much. And I'm very happy to say that I'm delighted to be here. It's an absolutely amazing experience to be standing here in front of you. And I want to be able to share my own personal discipleship journey with you. I want to share some of the challenges that I've had as well and how I've overcome them. And to begin with, I want to share this story because it's something that's really heartfelt, and I think some of you might be able to resonate with what I'm going to say. And it talks about, and it spans from my childhood when I was a little boy, right the way when I went to school and then university, and there were periods of doubt. Periods when I questioned my own faith. But ultimately, I was able to reconcile my faith with science, which was a passion of mine from the very early childhood years. As a boy, I often found myself looking up at the starry night sky, and I was captivated by the vastness and the beauty of the universe. And I remember lying in my bed, observing the stars at night and looking at them and feeling so small, but yet at the same time so curious about what I could see in the night sky. I could see the constellations, I could see the beauty of the universe, and the question in my mind at that time was, how did this universe come to exist? What was my place in this enormous, great expanse that I could see? And it was those questions, really, that were deep inside of me, and they caused confusion. I could behold the wonder of the universe, and I asked, well, where did this all come from? Raised in a pastor's family, I was taught that God created the universe. But yet, when I went to secondary school, high school, there were lots of theories that I came across about how the cosmos came to be, the Big Bang, evolution, and they all challenged my childhood faith. And I tried to reconcile all these different theories, but I was at a crossroads, really. The two worldviews didn't seem to reconcile in my teenage head, and I ended up being frustrated with all these questions emerging in my mind, which I couldn't really answer. And then I went to university as a science student, and the inner conflict inside of me, once again, it sort of intensified. And I sat through many lectures on science that brought further confusion in my mind. The lecturers, the professors, they gave compelling evidence, really, as to evidence that was credible information about how the universe may have come to exist. And I couldn't really figure out a way to reconcile my scientific knowledge and the theories and my faith. There seemed to be compelling evidence that suggested that the world of science indeed contradicted the biblical account of God creating the universe. And amidst this intellectual struggle that was going on, life, as it always does, it threw me some personal challenges, unexpected personal setbacks, family bereavements, academic challenges. They left me adrift. And it was during these times of challenge that my relationship with God began to reignite through prayer and seeking God to help me to answer these difficult questions, and also to give me that reassurance and strength to deal with life's challenges, I suppose, yeah. And it was during this time, this period, that I was blessed with a small group of people who came into my life, and they offered me a listening ear, unconditional support. And this community of faith really became a cornerstone for me, helping me to navigate my doubts and the challenges of life. And by having these people around me, they kept an eye on me, they checked in on me, and they helped me to grow and to develop into the person that I could. And they seemed to really provide that assurance and that strength that I was looking for during my times of self-doubt. And with their encouragement, I began to see things differently. I began to see that science and faith need not be at odds. I started to explore and started to research different perspectives that integrated both views, both worldviews, seeing science as a way to understand the mechanisms of God's creation, rather than a challenge to his existence. And my professors' teachings about evolution and the universe's origins became less about disproving God and more about marveling at the complexity and the beauty of his work. And in particular, I came across this Kalam cosmological argument, which is really against the idea of an infinite past, where the universe has no beginning. And it was absurd, since everything has to have a beginning at some point. Everything that exists has to have a cause that caused it to begin and to begin to exist. Infinite regression into the past seemed like logical absurdity. Or as another school of thought goes, that the universe just popped up out of nowhere. Well, then why don't other things just pop up out of nowhere? Why does the universe just have that unique ability? And these were the interesting intellectual battles that were going on in my mind. And then I also examined the idea of our genetic code, our DNA, which essentially is a language made up of four different bases, or to use an analogy, 4 different letters of the alphabet. And using these 4 letters arranged in different ways, we are all uniquely constructed in our physical form. Now the question was, where did that information that's encoded in our DNA have its origin? Did the molecules randomly arrange themselves to create this highly complex genetic language, or could it be the hand of a master designer? Then there's this idea of how life began on our planet. And there are so many theories out there. And once again, those theories, they rely on a sequence of random events, so that atoms and molecules, they're able to arrange themselves into highly complex structures, presumably by themselves. And the probability of that happening is really next to zero. And then what really resonated with me in this journey of faith was when the remarkable and highly acclaimed, absolutely wonderful scientist, the late Stephen Hawking, made a statement in his book, The Grand Design, a bestseller, that because there is a law such as gravity, the universe can and will create itself out of nothing. In other words, spontaneous creation was responsible for the universe. And Professor John Lennox from Oxford University responded to this by saying that it is incoherent and self-contradictory to say that the law of gravity is responsible for the existence of the universe. And that's because the law of gravity itself needs an explanation for its own existence and cannot by itself account for the origin of the universe. And slowly things were beginning to make sense in my own mind. And I'd like to mention just two more things that I found intriguing in this journey. The idea of omniscience and omnipresence. The theory of relativity and how that connects with omniscience, in that God is outside of time and knowing all. And the theory of relativity and how that connects with omniscience, it was fascinating to me. The theory of relativity came about in the 1900s by Einstein. And his theory has been proven and described over the decades, and it's got many facets, including this relationship between speed and time. And in a very simplistic way, what it says is that the faster an object goes, the slower time passes. And there were an interesting set of experiments done in 1971 in the Haefel-Keating experiment. They took a couple of cesium beam atomic clocks, and these are extremely accurate clocks. And they were synchronized and placed, one on the ground and one on a commercial airliner that flew around the Earth, and then it landed again on the ground. And they found that the clocks were no longer synchronized. They were actually off by an order of nanoseconds. And that can be calculated from the theory of relativity. The clock that was traveling slower was on the airliner that later landed onto the Earth. And this idea can be expanded so that the faster you go, the slower time goes. Until you reach an apex, or our limit, which is the universal speed limit, which is the speed of light. Nothing travels faster than the speed of light. And at the speed of light, light travels so fast that time actually no longer passes. And you see, at the speed of light, time is no longer a factor. In other words, light exists outside of time. And that to me was fascinating, the theory of relativity. But what's the theological connection? Well, theologically, we know that God describes himself and is described as light. And yet we wonder how God could be omniscient. And that is, how can he exist outside of time? And how can he be all-knowing? Well, if God is God, we know that he sees the past, the future, the present, all at the same time. And he knows all. And that seems similar and parallel to the idea of a photon, a particle of light, which can exist outside of time. And what I'm saying is that modern science, in modern science, if light can exist outside of time, we should not be surprised that God can exist outside of time. And then lastly, in modern science, there's this idea of entanglement. And how does that relate to omnipresence? Well, entanglement is a really interesting idea, a strange idea that came about in 1935. Einstein, once again, and others said, well, if you have two particles, and they could really be photons or electrons or molecules, and if they're entangled or connected, a change in one will affect a change in the other. And that's no big deal, perhaps you might say, but the interesting thing is that they can be separated for miles and miles. They can be separated further and further apart and still be connected. And there was an experiment which was mentioned in the journal Nature in 2012, where these two entities were separated for miles and miles apart, and they were still connected, interacting with each other. And that was the case of photon teleportation from one place to another that happens instantaneously. And this was fictionalized in the TV series, the film series Star Trek, where people can beam up from one place to another pretty much instantaneously. And the distance doesn't matter. This is the idea of entanglement. Well, how is this interesting theologically? I often wonder, how can God be omnipresent? And that's fascinating to me. Well, if God is here and he's interacting with all of us here and people around the world at the same time, separated by huge distances from him all around the world, somehow he's doing that instantaneously all the time. And this is also interesting because it's similar to the idea of entanglement. And what I'm saying is that if in modern science particles can interact with each other even while separated by huge distances, then we shouldn't be surprised that God can interact with humans separated by huge distances, and he's doing it with everyone instantaneously. Well, you might think, okay, so what? Well, again, I believe that science and God, as I have understood them, are totally interconnected and integrated. What I'm saying is that these qualities about God have an interesting precedence in modern science. Discipleship is about knowing God, who he is. And my journey was not just about reconciling science and faith. It was about finding my own place as well in this world. And the support of that small group gave me a new vision, a new lease of life. They helped me to see that my passion for science could coexist with my faith, leading me to a deeper understanding of both and helping me in my discipleship journey. Standing here today, I'm grateful for the wonder-filled nights of my childhood, the challenging questions of my youth, and the trials that deepened my faith. And I'm thankful for that small community that supported me and the vision that they helped me to see. And I'm now walking a path where science and faith, they coexist, each enriching my understanding of the other and my understanding of who God is. I hope I've given you some food for thought. Thank you.